Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to break this drawing down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, so that you can have a go, create this, and amaze yourself. Okay, so as explained in the intro, I'm going to break this down into steps so that you learn about the painting process and techniques, but also about the app that I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using their default A4 canvas, which might be different in different regions. So we'll go to the dimensions. It's 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. Also, the color profile here is one of Procreate's defaults. It's the sRGB code, the one that ends in 2.1. In terms of the brushes, I'm also going to be using default brushes that come with the app. So within inking, I'm going to use the dry ink brush. I'm going to use the studio pen. Within painting, I'm going to use the wet acrylic brush. Within artistic, I'm going to use the leatherwood brush. Within airbrushing, I'm going to use the soft brush, the medium brush, and maybe the medium hard brush. And within organic, I might use the rainforest brush. In terms of the colors, I've already pre-selected a color palette here. And each of the colors, if you go to the value section, has what we call a hexadecimal code associated with it. Each of these codes is listed down in the video description. You just need to copy and paste them into this box one at a time. Press enter, the color will appear up here, and then you can piece it together yourself one at a time. Or alternatively, to save you some time, there is a link next to the codes in the description that takes you to my Patreon page, where you can download the color file for free to save you some time. And Patreon is also the place that you can support this channel and gain access to exclusive content such as extended versions of most of these tutorials. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really does make a huge difference, and thank you so much. Another way you can support this channel is just to give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and also leave a comment. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. So the first thing we're going to do is rotate the canvas to the portrait orientation. I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to choose the first color on the top row. I'm going to drag from the color circle into the canvas and it flood fills. I'm going to go to the layers, click the plus symbol and create a second layer, layer 2. I'm going to go to the painting wet acrylic brush and I'm going to go to the second color on the top row. I'm going to put the brush size at about 5% and 100% opacity. And then we're going to visualize the sun is coming from over on this side. And we're going to do some clouds, and if the sun is coming from over here, it's going to light up, it's going to illuminate that left side of any of the clouds in our scene. So I'll zoom in just a little, and then with this brush, I'm just going to do some circular movements, keep it kind of moving around, and create an edge of clouds up here. Now I'm probably going to have much of this obscured by foliage from trees, but it's a good thing to just get it in there to begin with. And then from that edge, I'm going to do some sections that maybe circle away from the edge. And then I can do another layer of cloud maybe further back here. Again, just as a kind of scribbled movement initially. So I'm creating sort of round shapes, bumps in the cloud. I can have some breakaway little sections too. Maybe another large section over here. Doesn't have to look too refined particularly. I'm going to put it up maybe to 10% size and lower down. It's about 40% opacity. And then I can start to blend this in a little bit. Just to smooth some of that in, but not too much. I quite like some of that hard edge. But just a secondary kind of light tone is not a bad thing either. Maybe some more up here. You can tap, you can scribble, Doesn't really matter too much. A few little breakaway tufts and sections in here, maybe another larger shape in here. You can experiment with your cloud shapes. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. This is going to be cloud formations that appear through the foliage. It's very much going to be in the distance, but it is an important element. It will help create that sense of light throughout the scene. I'm going to put the opacity back up to 100 and maybe back down to the 5% again on the size. And then I'm just going to go back in, push that lighter colour on the very edge just a little bit more. And then if there's any major shapes that sit back a little bit, maybe you can just put some really strong light tone in there as well. You also have the option of going to the smudge and put the smudge on the painting wet acrylic, maybe 10% size, 80% strength, and you can twist and push this around. It gives you a slightly smoother look. I'm not doing this on the leading edge, but as it comes back into the cloud, maybe this is a good way of just softening it in, getting some nice textures as it kind of fades in a little bit. Just scribble it around, twist it around. Create some nice kind of painterly shapes. With that whole layer, I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur it in slightly, maybe about 3%, and deselect. Go back to the brush. I'm actually going to go and create a new colour, although it's not here on the palette. It's easy to do. So go to the disc, go to where the white area is, and just double tap that area, and it jumps to the absolute white. It would do the same if you went to the black area too. So double tap where the white area is, and it gets you pure white. So again, we're going to go in 5% size, maybe a little bit back from 100, so maybe 80%. And we can use that now just to push that white colour just a little bit further in places. It can be quite useful. It's really going to give that sense that it's an extremely bright sun, nice and clear. Again, just tap it in and around the edge. That's the area that's going to get the most light. A little bit less over here. We're going to have the sun over in here, so it's going to be brightest as it gets closer. Might just turn the size up to 20. Just have some more in here as well. When I've zoomed out now, I think that it occupies too much of the upper part, and I think I'm going to move it down a little bit. So on that layer, I'm going to go to Transform, Freeform, drag it from the blue circle at the bottom, so that the bottom part of the clouds meet about halfway up, or depending on how you look at it, down the canvas. So it's about halfway. Deselect. I could also bring it down from the top a little bit, I suppose. Freeform, blue circle, bring it down. If it creates a hard edge there, you just go to the smudge, wet acrylic brush, and just blend that in a little bit more. It's going to be obscured by foliage anyway, so don't worry too much. I'm going to tap on that layer now, put on the alpha lock, and I'm going to go to the colour disc, double tap in the white area again. I'm going to go to the soft brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to put it to 20% size, 100% opacity. I'm just going to ramp up the brightness of the cloud over at this side a bit more, just so it's really bright. Then I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 3. Again, I'm going to go in with a soft brush with an airbrushing. Stay with the white. I'm going to put it to 50% size, but only about 10% strength, opacity. And then I'm just going to tap in a few times over at this edge. I really want to bring some bright colour over here, just so it really bleaches out this area. Like this, just tap it in and around that area a few times. I'm going to go back to my layers and create a new layer, layer 4. I'm going to go back to the painting wet acrylic brush. And I'm going to go for the third colour on the top row. 5% size and 100% opacity. And then about the halfway, we're going to introduce some of this colour. Just circle it in. And if I zoom in so you can see it better, just creating some distant trees that will appear a little bit darker, but not much, than the clouds we already have. And you will find that it disappears in places and you can't see it very clearly, and that's fine. Once you've done that top edge, 10% or so size, and then just bring it down. Doesn't need to go beyond about halfway. Keep on separate layers, so I'll create a new layer, layer 5, and I'll go for the fourth colour on the top row. Same brush, same settings, and I'm just going to create a layer of trees. Let's settle a little bit forward of that now. And they don't need too much detail, too much texture really at this stage. But it's just creating layers and layers of foliage. Again, bring it down, flatten it maybe about that halfway point. And it's quite painterly, quite loose, quite easy. Just scribbling in. No great care with this. And again, we're about halfway for that horizon. So if you want to do a straight line, hold it till it snaps. You can move it around and you'll get that straight line now if you want that. I'm going to go to my layers, create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to go to the fifth colour on the top row. But I'm going to change brush this time. I'm going to go to the Drawing Evolve brush. Then I'm going to tap on it. I'm going to go to the stroke path and spacing and just put it up maybe to about 50%. Deselect, click done. I'm going to put the size maybe at 5% and just a little bit less than 100, so maybe 70. And then about a third of the way across, I'm going to start having some foliage of trees that just are further forward, nearer to us. And we will definitely start to see some breaks in that texture now. So you can tap it in, circle it in. It is pressure sensitive, so if you press lightly you get small shapes, press more you get larger shapes. So I'm doing a variety of textures, so press lightly to begin with maybe. Bring it down to that halfway, that horizon line. Scribble it in. Again, it's not a difficult technique. Maybe bring it across. We're going to obscure most of this beyond that leading edge really, but we may as well get it in anyway. Tap it in, create more texture. And bring it across, just in case little sections of it peek through. Something like this. Maybe a little bit more solid down there. I'm going to go to my layers, create a new layer again. We've got lots of layers, we can always condense them if you want to keep a fewer number of layers, but for now we're going to have lots of separate layers. So we'll go back to our colours, 6th colour, same brush, same technique. And we're just going to have some foliage now that is another layer. Cuts in front, I might put it up to 100% opacity in fact. Keep it a little bit simpler. Cuts in front. So you're getting layers and layers and layers of trees and texture. Bring this across and it can be a little bit taller in places too. Again, just scribble it in. Quite easy really. Go to my colours, we'll stay on the same layer now. We'll go for the 7th colour, which is going to be quite a lot darker, and that's fine. We'll just have that cutting in front, and I don't mind if it obscures much of what we've just created there, that's fine too. I'm leaving little bits, little dips where you can still see some of the other colours behind. I think it's good to retain that sense of different layers. Again, just scribble that in. And we're building up this sense of perspective now, so it's getting closer and closer to us. Go to our layers, create a new layer, layer 8, and we'll go for the 8th color. And then in this closer to area, perhaps we can just really push slightly darker on that tone. Don't need too much of that, just near the bottom perhaps. Again, just increasing that sense of perspective. Go to our layers, create a new layer. So on this new layer, we're going to go for the 9th color, maybe 3% size and maybe about 50% opacity. And we're going to use this now to just in and around, certainly where the darker tones are anyway. The top edge, the sun perhaps is going to just catch that foliage and just really illuminate it. So it just softens in some of these edges. Press lightly for smaller textures. Press more for bigger areas, bigger blocks. We just disperse this around. This is reserved really for just that top edge where the sun is going to catch. Perhaps turn the opacity down even further, maybe to 20%, and then we can just introduce it back there a little bit as well. Not as much. Back up again, 50%. And then just for these areas, again, that are closer to us, we just need a bit more of a concentration of that highlight. Something like this. I think that's starting to really gel together and create a pleasing effect. I'm going to go for the 10th color, create a new layer, layer 10, and then in this bottom area, perhaps we'll put the opacity down to maybe about 20%, a bit higher on the size, so maybe about 7%. And then just at this bottom edge, and then this shadow area, when it starts to meet the water, we can just have some kind of shadow colors or slight highlights that are still in the shadow. Maybe we have mist where it meets the water, or some of the light is reflecting back from the water back up onto the foliage even. So a mixture of that, and we can just blend it at the bottom edge a little bit. Certainly over at this side, maybe just circle that in a bit more, a bit heavier on that right side. Now I'm going to take layers 6 to 10, I'm going to pinch them together, so they're all on one layer now. I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, blur it in slightly, not too much, maybe about 3%, and deselect. Now with that entire image, I'm going to go to the wrench symbol, add, copy canvas, and paste. When we go to the layers, that whole image has now been duplicated, so everything has been duplicated as one flat image at the very top. I don't want all of it, however, so I'm going to go to the selection, rectangle, and just a little bit up from where it meets that horizon line, but not much. I'm going to select a rectangle all the way across. The area that's lined out is the area that isn't selected. We've selected this area of that layer. Go to the layers, tap on it, and clear. You see that the thumbnail instantly changes. It means that we've only got the duplication of the top area. So we can go to the transform, flip it vertically, move it down, and then we can line them up. Doesn't matter if there's a little gap between them. That's quite useful anyway. At this point, zoom out so you can see, and deselect. So we're creating a reflection in water, but we don't want it to be crystal clear. So I'm going to go to the adjustments, motion blur. I'm going to slide it to the side quite significantly to about 25% and deselect. And that just further helps the separation of clarity between everything above and everything below. Then within there, I'm going to go to the adjustments, liquify, push. I'm going to put the size maybe about 20%, 100% pressure, and just introduce some ripples in that, just so it disrupts it a little bit. Not too much. That will do for this point. And deselect. Okay, I'm going to soften in that edge a little bit. So I'm going to create a new layer, 8. I'm going to go to the third color on the top row. And I'm going to go to the soft brush within airbrushing. I'm going to initially put it at maybe 3% size, 20% strength. I'll just zoom in a little bit and I'm just going to soften that edge a little bit. Pull it all the way across and then going to put it up to 5%. And certainly above that line, I'm going to create some mist. Tap it in. Just generally soften that whole area in. I'm going to turn it back down again, 3%. And then into the water area, I'm just going to create some lines that come down there as well. Just lightly grazing the surface. Also, I'm going to go to layer 6. I'm going to go in with the smudge tool, put the smudge tool to the airbrushing soft brush, 3% size, maybe 50% strength, and just where it's a little bit crisp there, just soften that in as well. That does a better job at blending it in. Likewise with the inserted image, just at that point, just softening so there's no hard line there. Okay, we're going to start creating some really closer to features. We're going to do a tree to begin with. It's just coming in from that edge and it's going to obscure much of what we've already created in the sky. I always knew that was going to be the case, which is why we didn't spend too long on the clouds. So go to our layers, top layer, create a new layer above that, layer 9. I'm going to go to our second layer of colors, the first color. I'm going to go in with the inking studio pen. I'm going to put it to 100% size and 100% opacity, somewhere between the horizon line and the top of the canvas, maybe about halfway. I'm going to bring a branch that maybe splits off, thicker where it begins, and then thinner as it goes up. And it's pressure sensitive, so if you press lightly, then you get a thinner line, so you can increasingly release pressure and it gets thinner as it goes up. Maybe I have another section of branch here and you can scribble it in. It doesn't need to be as one neat line at all. I'm going to have that extending across the whole canvas. Again, double back over it. Thicken up that main branch. And obviously it gets thinner as it goes. We can have smaller branches that come from it, so maybe we can turn that down maybe to 20% size or so. We can have a finer branch, so you can press more and then release the pressure. Some little branches that come down here. Don't need too many of those because we're going to, for the most part, obscure it with foliage anyway. With that whole layer, I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and just blur it in slightly, maybe to 2%, just softens that edge a little bit more. I'm going to tap on the layer, put on the alpha lock. I'm going to change brushes. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing medium hard brush. I'm going to go to the second color on the middle row. And there's going to be light that reflects back up onto the branch. I'm going to put it at 2% size, 50% strength, and then just on this edge that points downwards, I'm going to have some light that just kicks back up and illuminates some of this branch. We can run that all the way across. It's subtle, but I think it's still relatively impactful. And then we go back to our colours, maybe the third colour, zoom in, turn it down this time, maybe to lower on that 2%, and the upper part, so the left side, depending on how you look at it, so this is the right side, although I would more describe it as the lower part. The upper part, I'm going to introduce some greens. Maybe they can kind of meld together in the center there a little bit. Something like this. Don't need too much of that. I'm going to go to my layers. I'm going to create a new layer, but I'm going to drag it underneath layer 9. So we've got some foliage that goes behind the branches now. I'm going to go to the fourth color. on the middle row, and I'm going to go back to the drawing evolve brush. I'm going to have it at 5% size and maybe 90% strength, and then we can just start to add some foliage that's in the background there. Now we'll start with some darker tones, but we're going to lighten them up certainly. Let's just start to piece in some foliage that sits back there a little bit. Again, you don't need to spend any real time with this. It's quite a simple thing just to start adding in, scribbling it in, keep it quite random. In and around the tree. I'm then going to go to that layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. I'm going to change colour a little bit, so I'm going to go for the 8th colour on the top row. I'm going to put the brush size maybe about 10%, 30% strength. I'm going to use this just to add in some more lighter tones and more texture within those areas. Bleach them out a little bit. A few taps of that. Like so. Go back to the layer, tap on it, turn off the alpha lock, adjustments, Gaussian blur, blur it in about 3% and deselect. I'm going to create a new layer above that, but importantly still underneath the tree trunk or the tree branches. I'm going to go for the 9th colour on the middle row, still with the evolve brush, maybe about 7% size, go for 60% strength, and then back there going to have a lot more illuminated textures as well. Just like the light is hitting here and the clouds, and this back area is going to be illuminating much of the foliage. Tap it in. It doesn't need to be completely consistent, it can be a little bit sporadic. Scribble it in. As it comes over here, we can introduce a bit more of it too. I'm going to go for maybe the 8th colour, a rich green. Got an area that comes down here, we can add foliage. And really this effect is going to be combinations of different greens. I think that the more varied it is, the better in many ways. Put it up 90% strength, and we can introduce more of this green over this side as well. Again, just scribble it in, tap it in. It's quite an easy texture to work with. And you're always going to obscure, have it overhanging considerably, so don't be shy using these colours. Block out much of that sky and light. More over here. Can't go too far wrong with this, so be quite liberal with it. Add quite a lot. Back in with a lighter colour, 9th colour, mix it in. A few taps. Maybe there's a section here that hangs low. We've got lots of vibrant greens coming in. Some more over on this one. Okay, I'm going to go adjustments, Gaussian blur, blur it in another 2% just to soften it. I'm going to go to my layers, back onto the branches and create a layer above that this time. And we're going to use a combination of darker tones and more light tone as well. So first of all, we'll do a darker tone. So We'll go for the 6th colour on the middle row. And we're going to get some textures that just cut in front this time. We're still at the 7% size and 90% strength. So just in the kind of shadow area here, we're going to really see some darker foliage. Same over at this side, although maybe it's a little bit too dark for that edge, so we'll just maybe just reserve it for this side. Maybe we want a slightly warmer green, so the 10th colour on the bottom row for over on this edge that cuts in front again of that branch. Bring it down, tap it in. I'm fine with it extending down further as well. Tap it in. We're getting layers and layers of tree foliage at this point. I'm going to go in with the 10th colour on the middle row, still with the evolve brush. Just get some lighter tones in here as well. Push that even further, just in places. Back in maybe with the 8th colour on the middle row. Maybe turn that opacity down back to 50% or so, just to create some variation in these. If it's too blocked in and it's not got any variation in there, you can just go in and break it up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of another section that hangs in here. Okay, quite pleased with that overall look. That will do for now. And then we're going to create a new layer, layer 13. Going to go in with the 8th colour on the middle row, 5% size, 90% strength. And we'll just have a little low-lying kind of bush in this area. Maybe some on the ground level as well. Go back in, 9th colour. Bring some of that sunlight just a little bit as well. Okay, so we're going to start creating some features that are more ground level and closer to us. So I'm going to create a new layer, layer 14. Going to go in with the organic rainforest brush, which I've got the spacing at maybe 40% within stroke path. I'm going to go for the 8th colour on the middle row, and I'm going to put it at 3% size, 100% opacity, and then just at this level here, we're going to push out into the water a little bit, and then circle it in, scribble it in, bring it down. Didn't need to be this brush especially, but it's just an easy brush to use. Going to go to the 9th colour, and at the top edge of that shape we'll just add some of this, tap it in, extend it out, go in with the 10th colour, circle it in, a few taps. We can even go for the brightest green we've got, which is the 9th colour on the bottom row. Add some of that in as well. Why not? Now with that section, we're going to go to the smudge. We're going to put the smudge on the inking dry ink brush. We're going to have it at 10% size, 100% opacity, and then from this top edge, I'm just going to push that light colour first. Create some grass effects. Push it up. It's quite a nice pleasing effect. It's quite easy to do as well. And then we're going to come further back and start pushing up some of these kind of mid-greens through that as well. And then we'll come to the darker tone and we'll push some of that through as well. Like this. Now we're going to create a little jetty in the scene. So we're going to create a new layer, layer 15, and I'm going to do the selection, rectangle, draw any old rectangle, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to go to the second color on the bottom row, drag it into the rectangle, and it flood fills, and deselect. Going to go to the transform, distort, and we're going to drag this bottom left corner rather, over to this edge where the grass kind of starts here. This corner, I'm going to drag lower down, not quite to the bottom of the canvas, but getting there. This one we're going to drag over here, and it's just a bit fiddly, but what we want to do, you can play around with it, is create like a horizontal line there at the top. Not quite, but more of a flattening out, maybe a slight pitch. It shoots off here, so it comes to where the top edge of the grass, or where the dark grass starts to kick up. This one lower down, something like this. So a little bit of a pitch to it, so it's not quite horizontal. You can play around with it until you've got that kind of positioning. I'm going to go to the layers slide and duplicate it. The bottom version, adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness. Turn the brightness down to none. And then transform. We're just going to move it down. So we create almost like a shadow of it. We don't need it to be too much, something like this. But we want it to be thinner at this edge than it is over here to account for the perspective. As it gets closer to us, this thickness of the jetty is going to be more. So we'll go to the transform, distort from this corner, bring it down a little bit, and it gets thicker there. Obviously that looks a bit strange, so we're going to go in with the first colour, airbrushing, medium hard brush, 2% size, 100% opacity, and just take that up so it joins up with it. That makes more sense. Now I'm going to take the top version, tap on it and merge down so that now condensed onto one layer. Go to the transform, and I can maybe just reposition it, put it on freeform, maybe just reveal a bit more of that grass, zoom out, flatten it a little bit. I think that looks better. So on this layer, I'm just going to go in with the smudge tool, put the smudge to the airbrushing medium hard brush, 2% size, 100% opacity, and we don't need to do too much of this, but I don't want that line to be too perfect, so I'm just going along it, maybe just break up the absolute neatness of it a little bit, not too difficult to do. Push it up, push it down, make it look less absolutely neat and tidy. Same on this top edge. Just break it up a little bit, just so it's a little less regular looking. I'm going to create a new layer above it, layer 16. I'm going to go in with the medium hard brush, and I'm going to go for the third colour on the bottom row. And we want to create a subtle sense of perspective here, so more of a horizontal line here compared to over here. But it doesn't need to be massively exaggerated, just a little bit. Now, I'm going to do the first few lines that really match the angle of this. And as they come over here, and I'm only using them as very light sketches initially, but I want slightly more pitched at this edge, but not too much more. I think that works. And then we can go over them again. Use those as your guidelines. Add slightly firmer lines now. If you've gone too far, you can flatten them up a little bit. And that's a good starting point as a guide. So you can see they're a little bit steeper here compared to over here, but not too much. It'd be very easy to get carried away and make them this kind of an angle over here and then straight there, but that is too much. So you want them to just be a little bit more of an angle here, but just resist the temptation of making it too much. Go over it a few times. I want this to be kind of quite ramshackled, quite rough looking. Stay on the same layer. I'll go for the fourth colour. And we can just build up these boards and planks, and I'm absolutely fine with them looking rough, twist the angles, however is easiest for you to work. Keep changing it up. That line's gone a bit too far off. I want it to look ramshackle, but not too strange. Try to do it as quick movements. We can always go and erase anything that's gone over the edge, so don't worry about respecting the edge too much. So I'm going to go to that layer, tap on it and merge down. So it's all in one layer. I'm going to tap on it and put on the alpha lock. And I'm going to go in with the 5th colour on the bottom row. Stay with the medium hard brush, still at 20% opacity and 2% size. And I'm just going to start building in this lighter colour now, respecting the direction of the lines. Don't worry about this edge, we'll tidy that up. We're just building up the boards. Much of this is going to be illuminated more directly in the sun. Something like this. Go in with the 7th colour and we're going to push it even further. This is directly in the sun now. Maybe turn that size down, lower on that 2%. We're going to pick out individual kind of boards at this point. Really have them lit up. If you want to hold it until it snaps to a straight line, then you can start to do that too. Create some straighter lines in the mix. Don't feel like I need to do too much of absolute straight lines though. Not really. Once I've got a few more in, I'm going to come up to that top edge. I'm going to put it up to 3% size, still at the 20% strength. And the sunlight's just going to bleach out, and we're also imagining the sun coming through foliage and texture. And so it's going to start to impact in a less neat way. Maybe there's another bit of sunlight that comes through here. Or dappled light coming through. Maybe turn it down again, low on that 2%. Dapple it through. I might even put the strength up, 40%. Put a few random little bits that come in here as well. Go to the 8th colour, and then just a little bit more care now, low on that. In fact, we'll go down to the 1%, stay at the 40% strength or so, and then just a little bit more care. Add some little sections of the boards that you see the straight lines highlighted. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 16. I'm going to go in with the 1st colour on the bottom row, medium hard brush, 3% size, 100% opacity. I'm going to do a post here, another one here. Come back from this, we're going to do another one here, another one here, another one here. Back from this one, do another one there, another one here, and another one over at this side. So that's just giving you the positioning. This one I'm going to make a little bit chunkier. This one a bit chunkier, but not as chunky as that one. This one just a hint more, and that one the thinnest. This one in the foreground I'm going to make a bit thicker. This one a little bit thicker as well, but not as chunky as that one, and that one just a smidge, like so. I can then go in with the eraser, set the eraser to the medium hard brush, 1% size or 2% size, 100% opacity. And then for this one, I'm just going to remove the bottom edge, take it to the corner, just remove it. I'm almost creating like a little bit of an angle here. So a bit of an angle there, a bit of an angle here. So they sit about where they should be. This one, or these ones, a little bit of an angle, and then it respects that line that cuts across. We won't see it there for this section. Do that again, a bit of an angle here, and then it respects that line, remove it. We can get rid of most of that one. And this one, something like this. So we have the beginnings of our posts anyway. Back to the brush, go for the second colour, zoom in. We can start to create a bit of a separation of angles. So 1% size, maybe 50% strength, and we can just do a line through the middle, just so we're creating those separations. Don't worry about the ones in the shadow. We're not going to see much in there really. We'll go for the third colour. Maybe on this side of this post, we'll add some lighter colours. This one subtly. Then we'll move along to more vibrant colours. So let's go for the sixth colour. And this one is going to have a bit more light on it because we've got sunlight coming through perhaps. It just illuminates that bit of the post. Keep this side mainly shadowed. A bit more light there. More light in that one generally. That half of it. A bit more light on that one. Go to maybe the fifth colour. We're getting sunlight hitting the top and maybe the edge to a certain extent here. On the top, we probably need a brighter colour. In fact, let's go for the seventh colour. You get a bright, vibrant colour at the very top. And even that maybe is not bright enough. So we can go for the eighth colour. The ones that are directly in the sun. Makes sense. Go back one. Seventh colour again. And maybe just along the edge. Lower on that 1%, just to have a highlight along there. Press lightly, add some kind of texture to that wood. Along that edge, maybe some streaks in there as well, a little bit, not too many. Along that edge, and the top, along the top. And this one can stay in the shadow. Go back to the fifth colour and we can start to just add bits of texture in there as well. Don't really want to spend too long on these necessarily. It's only just one small detail, so I don't want to overdo it. Just fine tune them a little bit. Just not too flat looking. And we've got more subtle colours, fourth colour. Even in the shadow bit, there could be some textures. Again, on the top, fifth colour, even these ones in the shadow perhaps just need a bit more. Now a little bit of a shadow from them, so we'll go for the third colour. We'll go in with the soft brush, 2% size, 40% opacity, and a bit of a shadow. Darken it up, certainly for the ones that are in the direct sunlight, and then go darker again. Second colour. Or even the first colour, the ones that are over here. Back again, third colour for this one. That just makes them sit there, feel a bit better. I'm going to go to the seventh colour and just fine tune these a little bit. Not much. This is the kind of detail you could spend a long time just really fine tuning those, but I don't intend to do too many. What I do intend to do is tidy up this edge. So I'm going to go to the first colour. I'm going to put it to 2% size on the soft brush, 100% opacity, and just nibble away at that edge a little bit, make it less even. But I'm also obscuring some of the lines that led over that edge as well. Colour them in. Nibble away at that edge, make it look less neat, get rid of some of those lines that are spilled over. Back to the second colour. And this side here, this board, has shadow, but we're going to have some lighter tones anyway, so maybe 50% strength, 2% size, and maybe just need some texture in here and the shadow part of it, but not much, just a little bit along. And then the actual edge of the boards, I'm going to go back to the first colour, Soft brush still, 1% size, 50% strength. And we'll just have maybe a line that cuts across here. Maybe a suggestion of it over at this side too, but not too much. I'm also going to go to the highlight colour, so maybe the 7th colour, maybe just a bit stronger, 70% strength and a bit smaller than that 1%, and just highlight some of the bits along this edge as well, just a little bit, but not too much. Okay, so that's the jetty mostly catered for, but we're going to have a reflection and a shadow for it. So I'm going to create a new layer, but I'm going to put it underneath both of the jetty layers. Layer 17 is down here. I'm going to go in with the second colour on the bottom row. I'm going to go in with the medium brush with an airbrushing, 5% size and 60% strength, and we're just going to start building in this colour underneath, just a section of it to begin with. Then I'm going to switch to the first colour on the bottom row, and then going to start introducing this as an even darker tone underneath. So it hugs that line a little bit. Turn it down 2%, and we get a bit of a corner represented here as well. Blend it in with that post. Have some little bits that kick back along that reflection, just disrupts that, a few points. Maybe just kicks out into the water a little bit too. And along that edge we can just have a few points. I'm then going to go to the smudge, put the smudge on the medium hard brush with an airbrushing, 3% size, 100% opacity. I'm just going to push blend that in a little bit. Soften that line. And as it comes underneath there as well, just soften that in a little bit. I'm going to go to my top layer, create a new layer, layer 18. I'm going to go in with the artistic leatherwood brush. I'm going to go to a nice green colour, so maybe the 10th colour on the middle row, 2% size, 80% strength, and we're just going to have some items that are perhaps just resting on the water. Perhaps even go a bit sunnier than that, so maybe the 9th colour on the bottom row. And then they're going to come down into this area too. We can extend it across this area, so it goes into the shadow area. We can fix that quite easily. Tap on the layer, put on the alpha lock, go for a more subdued green, maybe the 5th colour on the middle row, and then as it comes underneath here in the shadow area, we can just go over it and just subdue that green so that it seems to respect the shadow. We get a different colour there. We could also just have hints of it dispersed around as well, so you get kind of bits that stick up, create little shadows of their own. Go to a different colour green, maybe the 8th on the middle row. Just so we've got some variations in that green, it's not all appropriate to have one kind of green. Blend it through a little bit. Then I think we should go for maybe a white colour. Turn off the alpha lock. Maybe just have some white points on the water's edge, or the water's surface I should say. in and amongst these two. Have a disruption in the water. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to go to the inking dry ink brush. I'm going to go for some nice green items that are sticking up at the front. So I'm going to go for the 10th colour on the bottom row. I'm going to put it up 50% size, 100% opacity. We'll just have some plants and greenery here in the foreground. They're just sticking up, cutting through. So we've got the grass there. It only makes sense that we further push that concept, cutting in front of things that we've already got, and that's fine. Different angles. Maybe make it a bit denser here at the bottom. Maybe going with a subtly lighter green, maybe the 5th colour on the middle row. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, motion blur, and just blur them in slightly to the side. Not too much. Maybe 10% is enough. Tap on that layer, put on the alpha lock, go for a vibrant green, so we'll go for the 9th colour on the bottom row. We'll go to the airbrushing soft brush, 3% size, 30% strength, and maybe the sun is just going to catch one or two of these a little bit. We can just bring that light through in places. The top edge of some of these leaves maybe just catch. The light is catching a little bit. Back to layer 18, I'm just going to add a subtle hint of a darker colour, maybe the 8th colour on the top row. Back in with the artistic leatherwood brush, 2% size, 80% strength, and just add a couple of darker tones in there as well. Break it up a little bit underneath there. And the bottom edge there. Okay, I think I'm going to leave this tutorial here at this point. I hope you've enjoyed following along. If you have enjoyed, please hit the subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment, maybe a suggestion of what other kind of tutorials you'd like to see from me in the future. Thanks as always, and I'll see you back here soon. Bye for now.